Welcome to our 36th Wonderspace journey. My name is Steve Cole, and since September 2020, I have been asking the same 6 questions to people from around the world. The questions revolve around life and wonder, places of reset, and stories of hopefulness. This week, our orbit will take us from Ghana to Turkey, and to experience these views with us in this ultimate window seat, we welcome Tamsin Jones, who is a venture builder and an advocate for collaborative leadership. Tamsin is the co-founder of Workshop 17, which is a co-working environment in Cape Town that accelerates innovation and entrepreneurship. She is also the co-founder of the Boardroom Africa, which promotes exceptional female talent to boards across the continent. Tamsin also advises government, CEO leadership communities, impact investors, women in leadership, and is also a trustee of the Flipflopi initiative in Kenya, with a mission to eradicate single-use plastic. The full-length interview with Tamsin can be found on the Wonderspace Podcast, which you can find on the website and on most podcast platforms. For this shortened video orbit, Tamsin answers 3 of our 6 questions, and I start by asking, from this window seat, which place, city or country would you want us to fly over and why?
Two years ago, almost kind of today-ish, I was sitting on a very small airplane flying very close to the Himalayas, perhaps dangerously close. My knuckles were kind of white. I was hanging on to the side of my chair, and we were about to land in a place called Thimphu in Bhutan. And I was traveling to Bhutan on around my 40th birthday. I decided that instead of having a birthday party, I wanted to use the opportunity to reflect in a place that was different, to walk in someone else's shoes. And so we were landing. It wasn't just me, it was a bunch of activists and filmmakers and impact investors. And we were coming to Bhutan to the Center for Gross National Happiness. And we were going to be talking about issues of what is happiness? You know, what is your personal happiness? What is happiness of a country? What is happiness in a system? And for me, this wasn't academic. You know, at the time I was completely burnt out and I was operating on empty, and I'd lost the ability to answer this question for myself. So when we landed, we all sat in a big circle of strangers and were asked by our kind of guide from the center, Julia, to grab a rose petal and to put the rose petal into this bowl in the center of the group, and to say what our intention was for this week together. And I said, inspiration and direction for the next 20 years of my life. You know, no small thing. But what I did relearn there, and why it's my touch point, is I learned something that was instinctive, but I'd lost, which is what it is to be human, and what it is to value and practice connection with self and other people and nature. And so it was kind of like hitting the reset button on my computer. And it's a very special place for me, a very important touchstone. I grew up in South Australia, started out in a country town. My dad was a reverend. He was the kind of reverend that wore flip-flops and a t-shirt and shorts, and he had churches in pubs and skateboard churches, and our house was full of activists. And when I was 10, one of my heroes was a particular activist called Max, who had kind of long black hair, and she had tassels on her clothes, and she'd give me the most extraordinary giant hugs. And she used to be a prostitute and was helping other women who were in a similar situation to what she was in, and to come out of prostitution. And her life wasn't an easy life. You know, it was a life focused on, sort of tenaciously focused on social justice. And, you know, my dad would tell me that, you know, good things don't always happen to good people, but you do good kind of anyway. And this idea of tenacity and social justice has taken me really all over the world. It's not uncommon for people to look at my story of my career and kind of get slightly puzzled, I think, at the various things I've done. But the thread is tenacity and social justice. So it's taken me to working on the London Olympic regeneration with, companies from the city in Canary Wharf, to Cape Town working on programs to prevent HIV transmission to babies, and to set up a couple of ventures and organizations that I've co-founded. I'm really proud of a technology and innovation hub in Cape Town called Workshop 17, which has 250 entrepreneurs, a coding academy for young people who can't afford to pay for that training themselves. And it's really about inclusive innovation and, following on from that, set up another company with a business partner called the Boardroom Africa, which is really the leading solution for getting more women on boards across the continent. And we set it up because people were saying there were no women for board roles and we knew them. And I think this idea of tenacity and social justice means that kind of wherever I was with whatever I saw, there was always an opportunity to do something, do something good, do something that would have a real impact. And my passion has always been on building these things. And then when they're built, handing them over to someone that is better at operationally running them, because this kind of connection to what next and what could be done is so strong in me. But there was a moment one day when I realized I'd achieved a lot, but I couldn't feel my emotions anymore. And I wasn't really setting these healthy boundaries in my personal and professional life. And I didn't know it at the time, but these were signs of burnout, and from talking to the thousands of women across our board network, I wasn't the only one experiencing this. I'm not the only leader. I'm sure I'm not the only person here, experiencing this. But I became really kind of curious about why this tenacity and focus on social justice was burning me out, and how could I have an impact differently? And so I started kind of voraciously and slightly obsessively reading about this based on an experience I had of being with the Center for Gross National Happiness in Bhutan, but also reading the Harvard Business School book on leadership theory and practice, kind of cover to cover, doing a coaching course focused on the body. And I started to sort of see that the tenacity that's got us here, got the world to this point, that had got me to this point of building a number of successful initiatives, is what was burning us out and was being systematically supported, and not just burning us out, but burning out our planet, because we were kind of using an old operating model. And so I've become very, very interested in the last 2 years on focusing on new models for the way we lead that aren't just more regenerative or healthier, but better. Because to find new solutions, if I'm interested in this emerging new solution space, we've got to get really comfortable with listening and not knowing the answer. And how can we listen if we can't hear our own sense of the world anymore because we're so busy doing? And so, sometimes when people think about that, they're like, well, that's kind of all well and good. I get that it's healthy for you, but are people kind of in boardrooms really taking this seriously? This idea of sensing seriously and connecting with nature and our bodies and these new models and ways of working. And I can honestly say, yes, I'm hearing more and more these conversations about consciousness in the boardroom, sort of this ability to be able to hold multiple truths and to listen. And these concepts like stakeholder capitalism, where the stakeholders are more important to business than the shareholders, because it's about the long-term interests of the planet. These are critical. And so I, at the moment, I'm very focused on creating a new training focused on leading with the body and the mind. So how do we combine and understand our sense of the world and our sense of who we are, which is something we do to make decisions all the time, but isn't acknowledged. And also more climate collective leadership models. So I'm working very hard on an initiative, a collaborative initiative called the Rallying Cry, which is bringing women who are climate leaders in running businesses into conversations about what policy shifts need to happen, not just from a data standpoint, but from their personal experience of soil quality and the need to sustain their communities, not just for 1 or 2 generations, but for many. So it's an emerging space for me because I think that's where the world is right now. But with all of that, there are lots and lots of opportunities for leaders to get together and get more involved. And so I'll be developing a lot more of support for leaders that are wanting to do that over the next 6 to 12 months. My story of hopefulness is a boat. And it's not just any boat, it's a dhow boat, which is a traditional boat. And it's not just any dhow boat, although it's made by one of the most skilled dhow boat builders in East Africa. It's a boat made of plastic that's been collected from the oceans and clad in 30,000 flip-flops, which is the footwear of 3 billion people. And the most common item found on our beach cleanups in Kenya. And this boat is called the Flipflopi, and it's 9 meters long and weighs 7 tons. And it's the first time this has ever been done. The Flipflopi is an icon really in East Africa to advocate for ending single-use plastic and also for reusing the plastic that's being collected. For every 1 piece of plastic collected in Kenya, there are 5 more pieces that will wash in. And so we realize that this is something that needs to be changing both on a local level in Kenya in terms of collecting the plastic and reusing, but also on a global level in terms of stemming that flow. And so the Flipflopi was created by Ben and Depeche and a group of people, and Ali Skander, who's a boat builder on an island called Lamu. And they've taken this boat to various places across East Africa. And most recently that has been Lake Victoria. But previous to that, it traveled over 500 kilometers from Lamu to Kenya to Zanzibar to Tanzania. And every time it travels, it stops at communities along the way and attracts hundreds of millions of people to engage with it, because I think some of the challenges with advocacy for ocean health, which we all know is important, and ending single-use plastics, which we all know is important, is that sometimes it can feel, like a stick, and the Flipflopi is one of the most vibrant, optimistic icons. If you see it visually, you smile. And so all of a sudden, the efforts to create this change come with music and this boat and this sense of hopefulness and this sense of what can be done, as you can see through this boat, which is a world first. But it won't be the only world first. The organization is creating an innovation hub and a series of innovation hubs along the coastline of East Africa, which are focused on using the plastics that are being collected, which have already been piled up and are ready to go. And we're looking for supporters, if anyone would like to help with looking at ways of turning this plastic into products, the usable products, where we're looking for partnerships. But the idea is to create local ways of creating products that can be used in the local market until we can end single-use plastic. Sadly, we heard just a few weeks ago that Ali Skander, the boat builder, his workshop where the Flipflopi was built and where future Flipflopis will be built and where a lot of other boat building takes place as well, has just been burnt down. So we're really always hopeful and raising money for that. So if people are keen to support this initiative, they can go to the Flipflopi website and lend some support to this grassroots movement across East Africa.
Human being is destroying the world, and people are not realizing this. We don't love our world, By just focusing on the short-term vision, people are just looking at the money today and they don't think of what is coming next. Everyone today is affected by plastic, but we have the solution.
This is pure innovation. Nobody's done this before. And we've built the world's first boat from recycled, thrown away waste, and we've sailed it 500 kilometers. One thing that we completely underestimated was just how powerful an engagement tool it's been. Everywhere we've gone, it's been like iron filings to a magnet. People have been magnetized to this optimistic, joyful project. We've actually had tangible results from our expedition. A hotel chain has banned single-use straws and bottles. We've seen the closing of Mombasa's dump site. We brought together the background conditions for change to happen, and it's done so thanks to taking it on a journey and expedition.
More information about Tamsin can be found at tamsinjones.com. In her story of hopefulness, Tamsin talks about Flipflopi, and more information can be found at theflipflopi.com. To listen to the previous 35 Wonderspace interviews, the website is ourwonder.space. I want to thank Tamsin for joining us on this Wonderspace, and I hope you can join us next week for more wonders and stories of hopefulness.